Thank you, Claire. That's lovely. So, something that's not on my bio but brought to mind when I was a venture capitalist in New York City in the late 80s. I was a young associate at two different venture firms, and it was apparent that the partners all got to get out and meet each other, but the young folks didn't. And so I and some friends created something called the Young Turks of Venture Capital, which basically was all the junior folks and all the VC firms in New York City got together for a lunch, or dinners, like once a month, and that was fun. Didn't think it ranked in my bio, but it's kind of pertinent. It's kind of like if you see a need, fill it. Anyway, I've got a few parting thoughts for those of you going off into the great world of venture capitals and entrepreneurship. Firstly, Claire, thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for this honor. It really is quite an honor. And after reading the bios and seeing the presentations today, I'm in awe. It was a bit of a leap of faith for you guys, since I've never done this type of speaking engagement. So let me know what you think, especially if you disagree with me. And I've already benefited from this invitation because it forced me to think about what's most important. Despite over 100 speaking engagements in the past, this is the latest one I've done, latest time of day. And I see that the servers are not serving. I hope that they will serve and you will continue to eat while I'm talking. And even if your back is to me, you won't miss that much. As Henry VIII said to his wives, don't worry, I won't keep you long. More preamble. I'm guided by the golden rule, which parenthetically is often misquoted. Maimonides, around the year 10, was asked to teach the entire Bible while standing on one foot, and he said, do not do unto others that which is hateful to you. Everything else is commentary. And so that's his summary of the entire Bible. The golden rule of speaking is I want to speak as I would like to be spoken to, and so I'm going to speak quickly. People can typically absorb about 2 times faster than normal delivery speed, so tell me if it's a problem. And it also uses your experimental cycles, which forces better concentration and discourages multitasking, which has been found to not really work anyway. So my apologies to non-native English speakers. This PowerPoint will be posted on my website tomorrow, and the URL is going to be at the end. A little more Exordium, which is a word meaning the beginning or introductory part of a discourse or treatise. You should note that from your age onwards, most aspects of intelligence go down, except not your vocabulary. And I hope to impart a little knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So, yeah. So quotations are like statistics. You can prove almost anything with them. I love quotations. Much of what you hear in my guiding principles, I don't always follow my own advice, but I try. So if I limited my advice only to what I adhere to, then this would be a much shorter, less useful talk. VC and entrepreneurship, I can't imagine a better profession. Broadly defined, it will save the world. Happiness is doing what you love, and success is getting paid to do it. So I'd say you're all pretty fortunate, as am I. It's blossoming in Israel, China, and a few other places, but I feel it's under threat in the United States, but I'll get back to that later. In most other parts of the world, it's barely sustainable on its own. There are a lot of places where the government is trying to foster it, but let's recognize that sustainable means able to pay for itself on an ongoing basis, and that's barely happening elsewhere. And so I'll get to that later. So management. It's like in real estate, location, and it's so true. Warren Buffett had a wonderful quotation. He said, in looking for someone to hire, look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. But the most important is integrity, because if they don't have that, the other 2 qualities, intelligence and energy, are going to kill you. He also said, you can't make a good deal with a bad person. That's also very wise. And something that I said for years is greed and naivete are a dangerous combination. I've seen this play out both by entrepreneurs and investors. For example, this happens even by venture capitalists at board meetings when they say, for example, we can't afford to hire a new CEO now. We'll replace the CEO after the next round. But we're not going to tell the potential investors that we plan to replace the CEO. That doesn't really work. Usually the next round never happens due to the bad CEO. And if it does happen, then people are pissed. I mean, the investors are pissed for not having been disclosed. But a unifying principle to most misdeeds is the common thread is the inability to properly run scenarios in your head, as in chess, to foresee what the potential scenarios are that might play out. Ultimately, it leads to the question of what were they thinking? And apparently usually not much, or not very far ahead. So decision trees can be a useful construct to talk things through in many different roles. And ironically, I went to Stanford Business School, and the only course that I placed out of was the one known as treatise. And it happens to be the only thing I never did before going to Stanford. I didn't place out of the economy, I was an econ major, I didn't, and so forth, but I placed out a treatise despite never having drawn one. As a member of the board of directors, one of the key issues with any company is knowing you have a problem. There are certain sayings which I think may be useful to echo around your head over the course of your lives, and one of them, which I did not originate this, but it's been useful to me, and I don't remember who did. You can never adequately capitalize bad management. In other words, if the management is bad, no amount of money will ever get it to work. It's also the case that failure usually manifests itself by needing more money. It's, companies don't generally implode, they just sort of need another round. And the above should really, really be remembered. If there's anything I say tonight, those are probably the most valuable too. I'd also like to say that before you replace management, remember that most replacement CEOs don't make it a success. Or maybe it's about 50-50, I think, industry standard. So it's just important to have humility about that. And a friend of mine said about 20 years ago, he said, when you lose the founders, you often lose the company's soul. And I tend to agree with that. In general, if founders can be kept, it's best, although founderitis is hard to deal with. In my opinion, the main role of the board of directors is to replace the CEO when needed. The other stuff's important, but it's secondary. There are times when it has to happen. The best early warning radar, in my experience, is by staying connected with the VPs. Usually in most companies, information flows to the directors and investors via the CEO, but the VPs are often willing to be more honest than the president is. And when the good ones leave, then that's, if you do an exit interview, then you can get a lot of useful information. And ideally, if you catch them before they leave, then sometimes you keep them and get rid of the CEO. Maybe that's the sign. One sordid case, a company of mine, there's someone I introduced to the company, she became a salesperson, and the company went public, and then she called me up one day saying that she was going to leave, and when she told me why, I regretted not having stayed in closer touch with her. She said, well, this sales guy is making me drive around finding warehouses to put product in for our customers who don't really want to take the product down. Long story short, there was a huge accounting scandal. Now, if I had known that before we went public, it would have been a lot less expensive. Oh, and another case of another company of mine, the VP of marketing, when he decided to leave, he told me about how the CTO wasn't really pioneering. It was just reading a Japanese technical journal and then trying it out and making it sort of seem like innovation. And so I tried to bring this to the attention of the other VCs, many of whom were 20 plus years older than me. This was circa 1990. They didn't want to pay any attention to me, so I stopped investing, and I lost a lot less than other people did. My father has often said, well, no, that's not so analogous. But anyway, you tend to learn a lot more from your losses than your gains, that's for sure. By the way, I see you guys looking at me and not eating your food. Eat your food. Everything that's on the screen will come out of my mouth, so you won't miss anything. Another sign of impending failure is when the president of the company tells the VPs not to talk to the board of directors. That's a big red flag. On the other hand, most exiting VPs will have criticism, and I think it's still worth hearing. But an analogy to my college girlfriend, I observed that when she was having her period, we would often have a fight. However, all of her criticisms were perfectly valid. It's just that they were more likely to come up during that time frame. And the analogy here is that all exiting VPs have legitimate criticism, but you need to assess to what extent it's, how serious is the issue. Another friend of mine can speak, well, he's a friend now, he wasn't then, but he was a speaker at the Stanford Business School. He said, when the team no longer believes in the inevitability of success, it's the beginning of the end. So I'm not sure I buy that, but I've been pondering it for 23 years since he said it. There's some wisdom to it. So, good management. Let's ask Bill Reducial, who's the former CTO of AOL, why is it that some programmers are 10 times more productive than others, yet they don't get paid 10 times more? He said, because intelligence is logarithmic, and it's not always perceived that way. People who are really, really smart are really like 10 times smarter than just smart. But we don't really fully wrap our minds around that concept. But it shows in programming productivity. And this reinforces why it's essential to back the best. Also, the best companies are highly selective in their hiring, and that's a critical thing as companies grow to try to maintain culture and a high quality. In general, hiring advice that's good for you and your companies is people should only hire people that are smart. You should only hire people that are smarter than you. Part of my belief system, and these ideas are, while they are mine, they're not copyrighted, trademarked, or patented, and so feel free to make them yours as well. Life is long, and so are memories, especially for misbehavior. And every action should be assumed to be a public one. With the internet, this is becoming more and more true every year, and the internet makes all record permanent and searchable. With new sites coming along like Glassdoor and so forth, there's lots of private actions that become public actions, and so acting with integrity is even more important. In preparing for this, I also read, consumed various things that might have wisdom, and this is one that I thought was interesting. It was advice from a janitor to Emil Houghton, the son of the founder of Corning Glass, who later became the head of Corning Glass. He said, stay in the inner circle. He drew on the board 2 circles. The inner one said your conscience, and the outer one said the law. It's a nice way to put it. So, memories. Long after people remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. And this is really important, especially given the life is long thing. Recent research has shown that adrenaline makes memories stronger and more permanent. And that has a strong bearing on pissing people off. You may recall lots of incidences in your life like they were yesterday. That's what adrenaline does to you. And when declining deals, it's important to be kind and helpful, and also to be sensitive to the power relationship. I mean, you're the one with the money, and often you're a lot younger than those potential entrepreneurs who might be old enough to be your parent. And it's important to be considerate. And also, great entrepreneurs sometimes have bad ideas prior to the good ones. If you're interested in coming back to the good ones, that's another reason to be respectful. As long as we're on memories, here's an unrelated scary comment about memory. You perceive time as a percentage of your life. So every doubling feels the same. So when you go from age 5 to 10, feels the same as 10 to 20, feels the same as 20 to 40, feels the same as 40 to 80. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know. As Abraham Lincoln said, and in the end, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. So even though you do perceive time that way, I think if you punctuate your life with a large variety of activities, that will tend to make it seem more full and slow it down. Boards of directors. It's important as a board member to beware of arrogance, especially reflexively replacing the CEO. I have seen this, sometimes it's a power trip, and that when young VCs who have been empowered by their firm's money to have a position of authority over these people, and given the nature of groupthink and kind of Lord of the Flies, attack the person while they're out of the room kind of behavior, I've seen efforts to replace CEOs that were inappropriate and misapplied and would have been damaging. So it's important to try to minimize that. It's a quote from Charles Darwin. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. There's many others of similar quotations from great people that will be in the notes of the slides in case you get them. And another good one is, the true test of character is not how much we know how to do, but how we behave when we don't know what to do. On boards, I found that it's emotionally gratifying to add a lot of value, but I've also found that emotional gratification is often inversely related to subsequent financial gratification. In the situations where I give advice and they say, well, we tried that and blah, 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 it's often a better situation than, oh, wow, what a great idea, we never thought of that. So anyway, getting to macro issues. So here is a graph from the NVCA annual report that shows the capital commitments to U.S. venture funds from 1985 to 2011. You can see there was a giant spike leading up to the bubble, and then it fell down very, very low and came back, and now it's down again, and a little bit up. So, there's a lot of thought about what's happening here. So let's zoom in on the last 6 years. In 2011, $18.7 billion was raised in the U.S., and comparing that in 2011 dollars to 1996 had 16.5 billion, and 1997 had 25.4 billion. We're at a level of funding similar to between 96 and 97. I think that's too low. So while 1999 2000 were too high, this is, in my opinion, too low and much less than it should be for our economy and for the level of innovation and brilliance. And I've seen so many great deals go unfunded, and great entrepreneurs with wonderful ideas that didn't have meaningful competition. And I see a lot of great VCs finding other lines of work. So in my opinion, this is probably not cyclical. There are some structural problems. I would say we did this to ourselves. The Jobs Act undoes it somewhat, but most of the factors I think may still exist. It's a delicate ecosystem. It's very complex. I mean, all those different factors that make for our entrepreneurial economy. Another concern, if you compare, the U.S. raised 18.7 billion last year, and China raised 28.8 billion. It's true, it's a much bigger place, and they've got there are a lot more areas in which they can grow where we are already sort of established. But it is concerning as somebody who likes America. But China is the answer to the 2001 venture capitalist prayer, which, if you haven't heard, is, please God, just one more bubble? There are some things that still need to be fixed with respect to the policy. So immigration policy, the notion that we train bright people in our universities, and then as soon as they graduate, send them back home rather than letting them stay here. There are a number of issues with the IPO market. The Jobs Act helps with some of them, but not all. There are accounting problems, which nobody really talks about much, but pooling of interest used to be the way in which companies were accounted for when they were acquired. That's where you basically slap your balance sheets together, and that was made illegal, and so that it's now required to do, you only use purchase accounting, which means that you have to write, if you the book value of the company is 100 million and buy it for $1 billion, you have to make 900 million of goodwill. And then when the company later has to write it down, and they have these huge write-offs, and it creates all sorts of weird problems that tend to cause companies to not pay as much, in my opinion. And I think that it was done away with primarily due to America's tendency to, it's kind of puritanical self-denial. It's kind of what my kids used to say, if it tastes good, it must not be good for you. And options expensing is a similar issue. The fact that options have to be registered as an expense is a failure to think. It reflects a failure to think in another dimension. There should be a schedule that just shows dilution over time. There's Warren Buffett isn't always right. And the U.S. declining education quality, the FDA's speed and the regulatory burden, patent delays, which were not fixed by the Americans Invents Act. In fact, this new law, the American Invents Act, makes life worse for us. So a short riff on the AIA. So it changes our system from first to invent to first to file. We were the last country in the world with a first to invent system, part because that's what it says in our Constitution. In the first to file law, there is a change in the grace period that preclude patenting anything that's publicly used. In other words, if somebody invents something and then takes it to a trade show to see if the dogs eat the dog food, if they publicly use it, then they may not patent it. Also, anything offered for sale. So there are a number of ways in which that one could inadvertently trigger the inability to get a patent by if you were to tell somebody what the price would be, for example. And this is astoundingly stupid. First to file, in my opinion, will eliminate the open innovation model for those companies for which patents are important. First to file is also a hacker's dream, because if hackers can determine what your plans are, then they can either A, patent it first, or B, cause a publication that would preclude your ability to patent it. So, another thing this law changes is called introduces post-grant review, which is misused in other countries to enable incumbents to prevent challengers' patents from issuing. Many of you may have heard of the economist Joseph Schumpeter, who coined the term creative destruction, which is what happens when new entrants into the economy with revolutionary thises and that's disrupt the order and creatively destroy that which exists before. The incumbents basically go, I don't like that so much, so I want to have a little less of that. So we're going to be more like the rest of the world whose patent systems fail to work. Meaning for you, what does all that have to do with you? Well, I got involved in the patent issue to fill a vacuum. Most VCs were unaware of this issue, or they were misinformed or indifferent. The NVCA opposition was mild due to a naive split within the board of directors between the patent haters and the patent likers, and the patent haters didn't realize this law wasn't going to make things any better. The NVCA also had other issues to weigh, like they were lobbying about carried interest and other things, so they basically had expressed mild disapproval. The good news is that this bill isn't as bad as the ones that almost passed, but it's still pretty bad. Now, the Jobs Act is a positive example of effecting change. That it shows that it is possible to not just accept your environment and as the hand you're dealt, but actually to change that hand. Society is what you make of it. It's malleable, and it can be shaped by you. So I urge you all to not just be a passenger. And it's even more true for those of you in other countries. You can affect the entrepreneurial ecosystem in those countries and affect what the rules are that you have to live under. You can make a difference. So to quote Albert Einstein, the world is too dangerous to live in, not because of the people who do evil, but because of the people who sit and let it happen. And one last Einstein quotation. If A is success in life, then A equals X plus Y plus Z. Work is X, Y is play, and Z is keeping your mouth shut. So now is the time for me to do that. Thank you.